I am Bonnie Hamilton. I'm co-chair along with Harriet Harvey Horn of the Climate Reality Bay Area chapter, and it's wonderful to see you all here tonight. And again, we're thrilled to bring this event to our Climate Reality Bay Area community. Our program tonight is hosted, as I said, by our Youth Climate Action Team, our YCAT team, and our presenter is Dash Leeds, who is the conservation organizer for the Loma Prieta Sierra Club and has been an advocate for youth taking local climate action. He's also a building electrification and local policy advocacy guru, and he'll lead us in how to most effectively advocate for local government policy. And welcome to everyone on behalf of the Climate Reality Bay Area community. I want to say how pleased we are that you've joined us here for this program. Before turning things over to our hosts and speakers, we want to take a moment to share a bit about the Climate Reality Project in the Bay Area chapter. The Climate Reality Project is an international nonprofit organization founded and chaired by former U.S. Vice President and Nobel laureate Al Gore. Mr. Gore founded Climate Reality in 2007 with the mission to mobilize a global grassroots network of climate advocates. Today, Climate Reality spans 170 countries with over 50,000 climate reality leaders around the world, trained by Mr. Gore himself, and also to speak truth to power about the climate crisis and its solutions. The Bay Area chapter is one of the earliest and largest regional chapters of the Climate Reality Project. Since our founding in 2017, we have taken the Climate Reality mission to the local level with over 1,500 members, catalyzing solutions to addressing the climate crisis and climate justice across the San Francisco Bay Area. Our activities are anchored in the core tenets of the Climate Reality mission. One, to educate and inform the public. Also, to use a climate justice lens for diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice in all we do. And also to mobilize a grassroots network of climate advocates to take action that will lead us to a cleaner, healthier, safer, more prosperous, and thriving future. Our chapter is comprised of roughly half climate leaders trained by Mr. Gore and half otherwise committed community members engaged in taking urgent action to adopt solutions to the crisis. We have local county squads and chapter teams focused on policy action, climate justice, alliances, climate education, youth and young adult involvement, business engagement, as well as communications and events teams. Our goal is for the Bay Area and California to lead and serve as a compelling model of a regenerative future for the rest of the United States and the world. We invite you to learn more about our programs by visiting our website at climaterealitybayarea.org. And I have one announcement that there will be a follow-on complimentary event on November 17th to this event. It will feature a panel of local government leaders giving their advice on how best to influence town and city councils. And to learn more about our upcoming events, you can visit the events page on our website. Two quick housekeeping notes. This event is being recorded and will be available on the Climate Reality Bay Area's public YouTube channel within a couple of weeks. And we ask that you hold your questions until the end of the presentation or put them in the chat. There'll be ample time for question and answers, and we look forward to that portion of the evening. Now let's turn it over to our amazing Youth Climate Action Team, YCAT. And as we do with all our Climate Reality Bay Area events, we will open with a land acknowledgement led by one of our YCAT co-chairs, Josh.
Hi, everyone. I'm Josh Mordaunt. I'm a senior at Los Gatos High School, and I took the Climate Reality training online in 2021. A fun fact about me is I'm a competitive cyclist. And now for the land acknowledgement. With respect, we acknowledge the Ohlone, Miwok, and Putwin, and other indigenous peoples whose ancestral lands we currently occupy in the greater San Francisco Bay region. This land acknowledgement helps remind us of the historic and ongoing oppressions of Indigenous people, how the taking and occupying of Indigenous lands and the exploitation of Indigenous people and those lands is directly connected to the climate crisis, and how building relationships with and following the leadership of Indigenous people here and everywhere is crucial as we seek and build long-term solutions to the global climate crisis. Over to you, Crystal.
I'm Crystal. I'm a computer science sophomore at UC Santa Cruz and also YCAT co-chair like Josh. I did the climate reality training in 2020. It was online because it was during the pandemic. But yeah, so basically like back in high school, I was like part of the environmental outreach club, same high school as Josh actually. And so like members of the environmental outreach club, we like went to Dash's presentation, and with his policy advocacy toolkit, we were able to get multiple people to send letters and attend a public comment meeting with the Los Gatos Town Council members. They were super receptive because of our youth, and it was overall like such an empowering experience. Within a day, like the town council members responded to my email and like agreed to meet us like one-on-one. Is pretty crazy. I think youth have such an important and powerful voice when it comes to advocacy, and like when people our age like speak up, like it really means something. Dash is also I'm going to introduce our speaker, Dash. Dash is passionate about protecting the environment, and as an advocate, he specializes in local, city, and county ordinances and planning processes. He joined the Sierra Club Loma Prieta chapter in 2019, where his work expanded into climate change policy, including advocating for more than a dozen successfully adopted building electrification laws. He has worked alongside a community of dedicated activists on local city ordinances and supports the volunteer-led Climate Action Plan team, which advocates for aggressive climate action plans in local cities. Dash believes the world needs like more environmental advocates, and that ordinary people can have an extraordinary impact in local politics. He regularly educates local residents on the basics of advocacy and navigating local government. We are thrilled to have him here to speak with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Crystal. And fun fact about me, I actually got into all of this by watching YouTube videos of a young Lakota climate activist out in the Midwest. So it was young Indigenous climate activists that got me here to begin with and inspired me to take action. Anyways, yeah. So I'll start sharing my screen. We're just gonna hop right into advocacy. So what I'm gonna talk to you all about tonight is specifically how to influence local government. Now, as environmentalists, there's a lot of different ways we can affect change. Just look at the Indigenous activists who opposed the Dakota Access Pipeline. They did a lot of peaceful protest, a lot of peaceful nonviolent direct action. So there's a whole variety of tactics that you can use as an environmentalist. I'm just here to tell you about one pathway, one strategy, and maybe this will click with you. And if it does, great. I hope you follow this path. And if not, my recommendation is always to follow your passion, fight for what you believe in, using the tools and skills that you are passionate about. So without further ado, let's hop in. So going back in time, what I wish someone would have told me when I was in high school. The first thing is I wish someone had told me that I had way more political power than I thought I had. I was sort of caught in this mentality that I just needed one more step before I could affect change in the world. Oh, I just need to get a little bit more research under my belt. I need to have some more credentials. I need to be a professional in my field. That's actually not true. And I actually think that local government advocacy has it's a little complicated in how it's designed, but it actually has a pretty low barrier to entry. And once you get in there, you'll be surprised with how much power individuals can have in their local government. I've seen just a handful of kids, frankly, convince an entire city to adopt and implement a climate action plan that they had no plans to do to begin with. So the amount of change that young people can have is remarkable. And local government advocacy is like this secret, not really secret, but kind of secret because not enough people do it. It's like this hidden avenue that we have to affect change that all of us are capable of, and I don't think enough of us take advantage of that. So it's part of my goal to help you realize your own power and just to maybe give you that little nudge to maybe try it, try sending in a public comment or a letter and just see what happens. And I think you'll be surprised. And throughout this process, we make mistakes, we fail. So don't let the fear of failure inhibit you from taking action. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I guess if you take away 2 words from this presentation, and that is show up. And advocacy is all about making your voice heard. So showing up to public meetings is an example. Maybe sending a letter is your way of showing up. Maybe that's showing up at a protest or showing up at a family dinner to talk about the environment. Whatever way you can, I think we all need to show up right now, especially for the next 10 years when emissions reductions are critical. So let's talk about what advocacy really is. In short, we're going to be influencing governments, but I describe advocacy as saying the right thing to the right person at the right time. If you check all 3 of those boxes, you've basically changed something in government. But a lot of work goes into figuring out how to do that. So figuring out first, figure out what the power structures are. And we'll be talking about a little bit about this, like how does a city government actually work? What does it mean to influence it? And then once you find out what the power structure is, you figure out who is in the power structure and how you can communicate with them. And then lastly, and we'll get pretty specific in this one, I'll actually click through an agenda document to show you what I mean, but using meeting agendas of these power structures to plan your strategy is crucial. And we'll get more into that later. But again, just that quick short summary, you're figuring out how can I say the right thing to the right person at the proper time. And let's talk about local government here. So for all of this, there's additional complexity that goes beyond what I'm talking about. But the core structure that I think is important to understand is that there are 3 main pressure points to local government. The first are your elected decision makers. This is called your city council, or if it's a county government, they're called the county board of supervisors. These are the end-all, be-all of government. They're the ones voting on laws. They're the ones giving direction to staff. And directions to staff is basically just when they tell their staff people to go do something, go write a law and put this in the law and come back to me. That's an example direction to staff. Then there are commissions and committees. These are sometimes appointed, sometimes elected. Oftentimes, commissions or committees are advisory bodies. They can make recommendations on policy, but most often they don't have the authority to actually approve anything. So an example could be like the Parks and Recreation Commission. If a city is considering an ordinance that affects parks, that ordinance or that law might find its way to the Parks and Recreation Commission before it makes it to the City Council. And depending on what the Parks Commission thinks of that ordinance, they might recommend that council adopt or reject the ordinance. And then last, but certainly not least, are staff and the consultants that they hire. These are the people, frankly, that are doing a lot of the work. They're writing the laws, they're taking direction from the City Council, they're collecting public feedback. They are the people writing the laws and creating the programs and implementing the programs. So if you have successfully influenced the elected decision makers, if you've elected or if you've influenced the commissions and committees that advise the decision makers, and you've influenced the staff that creates the laws that the decision makers approve, then you've effectively pressured all of the critical points of government, and you can influence the outcome of a policy. You can use this to defeat a project that might be harmful to the environment, or you can use these pressure points to pass a law that's beneficial to the environment. But again, just keep in mind these big 3 here. And let's move on to agendas. So a significant amount of time is going to be spent on agendas, and that's because I think this is where things get a little complicated and where people might get turned away. So I want to make sure we have that understanding. So when you see these big, long documents that you're not intimidated, that you know how to navigate it. And also, I think reading agendas properly is what can make or break an advocacy push. And I guess here's why it's critical, is because cities are public bodies, they have to notice to the public what their action is ahead of time, which means that the agenda is a way of noticing to the public everything that's going to be discussed in the day's city council meeting. And if there's something that hasn't been noticed in the agenda, the city cannot take action on it, which means that if you want the city to take action, the agenda is critical because the agenda sets the scope for what the city is allowed to talk about and take action on, basically. So I'm going to actually zoom out here and I'm going to show you what an agenda looks like. So let's go here, Town of Portola Valley. A lot of times I'll Google, like, we'll do Town of Portola Valley City Council agendas or City of San Jose City Council agendas. You'll get to a page like this with different links to the different meetings, and each of these is actually an agenda file. And rather than download it here, I'm just going to go to one that I've already downloaded. So I'm going to wait for the first page to load in. But as you can see, we've got a 196-page document here. I don't expect anyone to read all of this. When you get a document like this, it's all about tactical reading. So I'm just going to show you some really important things to keep in mind as you go through agendas. First, of course, is the day and time. You can see that this meeting is going to occur tonight in 8 minutes. This will be the Town of Portola Valley. Another critical thing to keep in mind here is the Zoom link. This is how you join the meeting. So I don't usually go into city council meetings in person anymore because of the pandemic and because it's easier to just hop on Zoom rather than drive in rush hour to a city council building. So you just click the Zoom link and that'll join you into the public meeting. So now that we're in the meeting, city council members are talking. How do we make sense of this? Well, the first thing to note is that agendas will flow from top to bottom, right? So item 1 comes before item 2, and so on and so forth. So you read this from top to bottom. Now, there are a couple agenda items that will be, how do I put this? They're universal across jurisdictions, right? So one of these is oral communications. This is an agenda item that gives the opportunity for members of the public to talk to the elected officials about any item that is not on the agenda. So you can talk about anything you want. And for climate activists, this is a really awesome opportunity. Let's say that the Town of Portola Valley today, let's say, for example, it did not have anything related to climate change on the agenda. Now, I actually picked this agenda because it has climate stuff on it, but let's say they didn't. You know, how do we talk about climate stuff? Because there's no agenda item related to climate things. We do it here. We can show up at the beginning of the meeting, tell city council what's on our mind about climate change. And then since this is at the beginning of the meeting, we can dip out, we can leave because council members actually cannot take action or discuss what you bring up to them during tonight's meeting. What they can do, however, is take your comments into consideration and in a future meeting, put something related to what you're talking about on the agenda. Or maybe you've rallied enough people to give public comments that the council member gets a little concerned. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of constituents complaining about the lack of climate action coming from the city. Maybe I better meet with a couple of them and see what I can do. So keep in mind, this oral communications agenda item can be really, really powerful. Now, I also want to talk about the consent agenda. A lot of times the consent agenda can be super, super long. I've seen like 20 items packed into a consent agenda before, and that's okay because the way the consent calendar works is that every item inside of it is voted on with one vote all at once with no deliberation or debate or discussion whatsoever. This agenda item is where the city throws all of its non-controversial things that it's doing that they don't think there's going to be any argument on it. So we don't really need to discuss each of these things one by one. We'll just approve it all with one vote. So, you're reading the agenda item top to bottom to try to figure out how long it is until you have to talk on that item that you've been waiting for. And you see the consent calendar has like 20 items in it. Don't worry about it. The city's probably going to move past those items pretty quickly. And then we go into the public hearing. And this is where the regular stuff happens here. Each of these items, so you can see item A and item B, each item in agenda will be discussed independently and voted independently on by the city council. And so there's an order of operations to this. First, the city staff will give a presentation to the public and to the council about, what are we bringing before council? What are we looking at? What have we done in the past on it? They just give council and members of the public a summary of what we're talking about. Then members of the council have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions. Then it's our turn. Members of the public then have the opportunity to give public comment. Now, if you end up going to a meeting in person, you'll end up filling out a physical card and dropping it in a box. That's usually how cities do it. If you join by Zoom like I do, you actually just raise your hand in Zoom when they tell you. They'll say if anyone wants to give comments on item A, please raise your hand. And then when you raise your hand, you'll wait until the clerk calls on you by name, and then you unmute. And yeah, that's basically it. But here's where it gets really important. As you can see, this is a 196-page document. The agenda itself is only 2 pages. All the other pages in this document are detailed information about each of these specific items. So I picked this agenda because there's actually a building electrification climate law in here that I really like. It's item 6A. And when I click on that, it jumps me all the way to page 126 of the agenda. And here's the staff report. So staff is recommending that the town of Portola Valley adopt a building electrification ordinance that includes a bunch of other things for water efficiency, and it updates the fire codes and all that. It's a big, long document. I've read through this. I actually really like this ordinance. I plan on attending this meeting later tonight after our workshop, and I'm going to be telling the town of Portola Valley to adopt this. What the ordinance does is it prohibits the town from building new and unnecessary gas pipelines in their new buildings. And I'll talk a little bit about pipelines in the future. So again, sort of to recap with the agenda, you can figure out the order of the meeting. You can figure out the correct point in time for you to give your public comment. And critically, before the meeting, you can read up on all of the staff reports, all of the details. Like, I think the ordinance itself here starts on page, like 177 or so. So I can actually just read through the literal word for word ordinance that the city's adopting. And if you really want to get specific, you can tell them, hey, the way you wrote this clause is ineffective. Or, if you find any weaknesses, you can really demonstrate that you know what you're talking about. And it all comes from the agenda document. So if you're ever confused, if you don't know what's going on with the meeting, just remember, go back to the agenda and start from there. All right. So going back here. So let's say you've read through the agenda. You should probably use that agenda to develop a specific goal. So again, your specific goal, it's going to be directed at the proper entity, at the proper time, with a clear ask. So the proper entity, that's a question of finding the correct agenda. So let's say you're checking through the town of Portola Valley, and the town has an arts commission meeting and a city council meeting on the same day. You look at both agendas. The arts commission meeting doesn't have anything interesting in it. Well, you're probably not going to attend that one. You look at the city council meeting. It does have some interesting stuff in it. So you're probably going to attend that one, which means your proper entity is the city council. You present your ask at the proper time, which is either at the very beginning of the agenda during that oral communications, if there's no item relevant for you. And if you are interested in a specific item, you wait until the clerk asks you to raise your hand for that. And again, having a clear, specific, and actionable ask. And sometimes that can be pretty basic, right? So like, you may think that, with everything I've shown you in the agenda, that every public comment I give is like, please modify, section 6A of line 4 of the ordinance to replace gas with electric. And sometimes we do that as advocates. We can get really, really specific, but a lot of times intent is good as well. So, if you don't feel confident in, like, maybe you haven't read the whole ordinance, or maybe a friend asked you to join in this meeting and help rally support, and you're just getting whisked into this and you haven't had time to prepare. That happens a lot as advocates. And in those situations, I'll just say, please take the strongest climate action possible. You can tell them how climate change affects you, what climate action means to you, and encourage them to take action. And that lends support to other advocates in the meeting who may also come with specific asks. So yeah, let's say you have a goal. How do you make your voice heard? So I love education. I think educating your friends and community is great regardless. Even if you decide never to contact an elected official in your life, or send a letter, or attend a meeting, telling your friends and family about climate change and even the possibility of engaging in local government advocacy can be super, super powerful. And let's say you do want to influence elected officials and staff people. You can arrange a phone call with them. Usually elected officials are available for like half-hour slices of time if you're lucky. And I think you'll actually be surprised, especially for the young folks here, how willing elected officials are to meet with you. And actually, I'll put it a different way, which is, elected officials are really afraid of being shamed by young people for obvious things that they should be doing. They don't want to ignore or look like they're ignoring young people. And they don't want to look like they're slacking on climate action in front of young people. So keep that in mind. Like, you actually, in many ways, have power and leverage over them. So recognize that. And I think you can be confident in that as well. So you can arrange for phone calls and meetings with elected officials. You can send emails and letters to the city. And then last but not least, and I think this might be the most powerful, is you can give public comments. And so what goes into a public comment? I told you a little bit about how you sign up for it by raising your hand. But generally, I plan for having 2 minutes or less to speak. That's a good rule of thumb. Sometimes if a city is really generous with their time, they'll give you 3 minutes. But if there's a lot of people speaking on an item, if it's controversial or very popular, sometimes you might only get a minute or 30 seconds. I've given a bunch of public comments over the years, and I still get anxious. I still get nervous. Even before this presentation tonight, I get nervous, and that's an advantage. That's something my mentor told to me super early on, and I've sort of like adopted that into my heart and tried to share that with other people. Because when you're nervous in a room, let's say maybe you're sweating a lot or stumbling over your words, one, that shows, and that's a good thing, because it shows that you're overcoming something to be in that meeting, to speak. It shows authenticity and dedication. And I think elected officials can recognize that. And again, with your public comment, it's important to be clear and specific and relevant. But I also want to emphasize that, like, a personal touch can go a long way. If climate change has affected you or someone you love, if you have like an anecdote or like something funny or tragic, something that like humanizes your experience and connects that to what's happening in the city that day, super, super powerful. So do not be afraid to draw from within when giving your public comment. And so I want to talk about like the loop that I find myself in. This is kind of like a summary of like bringing everything we've talked about together. So I'm always hunting for the next public meeting, right? Let's say I know the city of San Jose is considering a lot of exciting stuff. So at the beginning of every week, I just Google San Jose City Council agendas, and I'll open up that week's agenda for the city council, and I'll see what they talk about and if there's anything worth joining the meeting and talking about. So I find out when the next public meeting is. I look at the agenda for that meeting. I try to decide if there's any specific goals that come to mind when I look at it. If there are goals, then time to do our pre-meeting advocacy preparation. So that's when we prepare our comment letters, we reach out to elected officials, maybe we contact some staff people. And then, after we've done our pre-meeting advocacy, we actually attend the meeting, we deliver our public comments, we then take notes on the outcome of that meeting. A lot of times I will write down what the council members said, if they indicated their support or opposition to a policy and why. And then I'll use that information to help plan policies in the future. So if I understand who the elected officials are, and I know that there's 3 out of 5 people on a city council that like climate action, well, I know that we are now 3 votes to 2 votes on any climate policy. And that makes me want to go back to that city and talk to those 3 people on the council and get them to take action for climate change. And then, after you debrief on the outcome of the meeting, you're back to the loop, find out about the next meeting. And I've been doing this loop over and over again for about 4 years now. And it works. Gosh, if you just show up to meetings and tell people to do stuff over and over again, sometimes they do it. And that can be super exciting. So let's talk about climate change a little bit. I've talked a lot about government. I want to talk a little bit about methane and gas pipelines, just because these are some issues that are near and dear to my heart, and I cannot pass up the opportunity to tell folks about just how much I hate gas pipelines. It is core in my being, and it's part of why I'm fighting so hard on climate policy. So these natural gas pipelines, it's fossil gas flowing through them. It's essentially methane. In my region, which is the South Bay, methane is typically either the number 2 or number 1 largest source of greenhouse gas emissions for that city or county. On the right here, this is a greenhouse gas emissions inventory of the city of Cupertino. You can see that from 2015 to 2018, we decarbonized our electricity supply regionally. So it benefited Cupertino as well. You can see their electricity emissions basically fell off a cliff. It's less than 1%. And at the same time, their natural gas pipeline emissions have risen. So this is a big chunk for most cities to get rid of here. And fortunately, since in California overall, and specifically in areas that have even more decarbonized electricity supplies, it's really advantageous to electrify buildings. So rather than putting gas pipelines in our buildings, we just build them electric, build them with no gas lines. And hey, turns out it's actually cheaper to build a new building if you're only installing one power system. You're not installing the gas and the electric, you're just doing the electric. So you actually save about $10,000 just from avoiding the gas hookup, which is amazing. There's all sorts of negative health impacts from gas appliances. It's like, here's one that has stuck with me for a long time. Just by cooking for an hour with a gas stove, on average, we're creating levels of indoor air pollution that, if they were recorded outside, would be illegal according to the EPA. And we're creating that level of pollution in our contained homes. We have carbon monoxide, formaldehyde, ultrafine particles, all sorts of pollutants coming off of our stoves just from regular use. And I'm not even talking about leaks here. Oh my gosh, the leaks, insane. Gas pipelines leak throughout the entirety of the network. So all the way from use in the homes, along the distribution system to extraction, these pipelines are leaking constantly. Leakage rates have been measured at 8 or 9% leakage, which is wild. And it means that for a long time, folks have told us that natural gas is a bridge fuel, but it's not true. With the leaks taken into account, natural gas is worse for climate change, so worse in terms of greenhouse gas emissions than coal. So yeah, gas is bad. It's bad for climate, it's bad for our health, and it's cheaper to build without it. So, we know pipelines hurt our environment and our community, and now we're in the process of transitioning away from gas pipelines. So a lot of cities are passing what are called all-electric reach codes, building codes that say, hey, your new buildings cannot use gas pipelines in them anymore. And we've got, I think, gosh, close to 60 of them now in California, if I'm counting correctly, definitely over 50. And there's a ton of action at the state level. I won't get too into the specifics here because I do want to keep it high level. But yeah, gas pipelines, they have absolutely no future in our society. Every gas pipeline that we allow to be built under our soil is a liability and a tragedy. So I'm very passionate about making sure that we avoid building these things in the first place. And if a city has gas pipeline infrastructure, which our cities all do, figuring out how do we transition that infrastructure to electric over time in the future. So I mentioned reach codes and gas bans. Also these photos on the left here, this is I think in 2019, we got San Jose to pass a full all-electric code, a full gas ban. It was one of the largest cities in the nation to do so at the time. You can see me in the back, very happy there. And then here in Cupertino, the city of Cupertino also adopted a similar policy. And the Youth Climate Action Team won an award for their advocacy here. This was at the time, one of the strongest policies in the nation, actually still is. And yeah, it was pushed for mainly by young people in the city. So, you know, don't underestimate your own power. You can do a lot. You really can. So I'm just going to revisit some super general tips. And I think we'll be wrapping up here after this. So number one, just be persistent, be vocal. Advocacy is about making your voice heard. And if you heard anything from me tonight where you were thinking, you know, that's interesting, but like, I could do it a better way this way, or like, maybe, you know, I could do this instead. I say, absolutely go for it. This is not the only way. And I believe that we should have a real unification of tactics. So diversity of tactics, we support each other as climate advocates, and we do what we feel is right, and we use our own passion and abilities. And if you do follow this path, I highly, highly recommend that you learn from other advocates. And if we've got any experienced folks in this call, and I know we do, I always encourage you to help teach new advocates. I'm a big believer in individual mentorship. So I think even just getting like one person to attend a meeting and deliver a comment, it's a huge win. It's a good place to start. Even just one extra person talking to a city government about climate change, it makes everything worth it. So, you know, that one-on-one approach, really just maybe finding a friend of yours and bringing them into the climate fight, that's awesome. Please do that. Lastly, also, don't be afraid of failure. Oh my gosh, we could just have a 2-hour-long presentation, maybe even longer, of just all the ways I've screwed up over 4 years. So don't be afraid of failure. Learn from your mistakes. For folks who are younger, mistakes will be expected of you. So when you don't make them, it's a win. It's a huge win. And when you do make them, then it's fine because you're young and people will forgive you. So again, recognize you have an incredible, absolutely incredible amount of power to influence local government. I can't drive this home enough. You really do. Like we all have like this secret Uno card that we have in our pockets that we can whip out in local government to change policy. And if just a handful of us decide to take out our cards at the same time and play them, boom, we've created a new policy, or we've stopped a harmful policy, or we've tweaked something to our advantage. You really do have power. So awesome. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope you got some helpful stuff out of this. I do see a few red numbers in the chat, so maybe we do have some questions, and I'll turn it over from here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dash. Boy, I learned so much just listening to you speak every time. I think, Crystal, do you want to ask for folks to raise hands, or if folks want to just jump in and ask Dash some questions? Do you have 15 minutes to stay with us? What's your
Absolutely.
step?
Yeah, I have plenty of time. And my screen is frozen actually. So I may actually so I will be here, but I'll be back.
Okay, great.
Thanks so much.
Dash,
Oh, Alan Moskowitz, do you have a question?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Thank you, Dash, for your enthusiasm. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank you for like stating the power of youth. So in Climate Reality, they have a saying, you know, it's WWGD, what would Gore do? And I said, no, it should be what would Greta do? Anyway, my question is, do you have to be a resident or a constituent to, you know, like speak at a like a city council meeting?
The short answer is no. So you can join any Zoom meeting for any council meeting. You know, they're not going to physically prevent you from speaking, but the sort of complicated answer is your power in a city can vary depending on whether or not you're a constituent or if you represent constituents. So for me, I represent the Loma Prieta chapter, which has members in Portola Valley. So I can come to that city as a representative of our Portola Valley membership. So even though I'm not a resident of Portola Valley, I'm a resident of San Jose. I can come into that city and with some degree of influence, ask them to do things. Sometimes if you're not representing an organization that has connections in the jurisdiction, if you're a member of a neighboring jurisdiction, sometimes council members will listen to you a little bit more. And I think when it comes to climate change, there's a few things that I want to talk about in terms of strategy that I think make it acceptable for non-residents to speak in cities. And that is, one is the collective nature of the impacts of climate change, right? We're all suffering from the sea level rise, the you know, heat and air quality impacts. So our collective action and inaction either hurts or helps us all. And on the subject of that as well is the model we have here for local climate action. Even though we're going city by city by city to get the strongest policies possible, our ultimate vision for climate action isn't a city by city approach, right? We're not trying to like slog through every city in the US to affect change. We're trying to build a critical mass and momentum of local cities to compel regional and state and federal policy. And I think we're already sort of seeing that playing out. The CPUC recently decided to end subsidies for new gas connections. We have the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act. So this is, yeah, I think the local momentum is starting to push more and more state and federal action. And sort of bringing this back to your question, I think it's totally acceptable for like a non-resident to go into a city and say, hey, I need someone here to show climate leadership, right? Like it's not just a question of the literal emissions reductions, it's about taking a leadership position. So this is more effective in larger cities, right? It's like non-residents can come into a larger city like San Jose and probably be more effective than like non-residents going into a smaller town and speaking. So I hope I answered that question there.
If I can
Thank you.
jump in, I was going to say, I have spoken also in other cities where I am not a resident. And if you have, like Dash said, not just a constituency, but also membership, or could say, I don't represent, but I am a member of a large organization, say Climate Reality Bay Area, that has members in that jurisdiction. Or if you have technical background, right, to bring to that perspective, that also I think carries weight. So a lot of advocacy is done outside of the municipality, but using those other leverage points to make the case with the city councils. But thank you. Is there another question? I see another hand maybe.
Oh yeah, Brett Ehrlich, would you like to go?
Yeah, hi, and thanks Dash for the great presentation. It rang true on a lot of levels. I actually just this week gave my first public comment at a city council meeting on electrification. So everything you said was right on it in terms of how it actually unfolded. And our cat is gonna kill me here. I do have one quick question, which is, I assume a lot of us are trying to help push forward further electrification in the buildings, and seems like getting progress on existing buildings and homes is a lot harder.
Yes.
So are there any particular cities or counties that are further ahead that we can look to model that you can share?
There are, yeah, and they're actually in my territory. So I know a little bit about them as well. So I'm going to highlight 2 jurisdictions for you to start with for your research. The first is the city of San Jose has done a few things recently, and this is going to be June 14th is when they adopted these policies. If you want to go back to the city council meeting on that day and look at what they talked about and read the staff reports from that day, again, this is going to be 6/14, so June 14th, city council. The city adopted an update to basically their climate action plan. It's not called that, but it's what it is. They updated their goal to carbon neutrality by 2030, and they adopted a framework for the decarbonization of existing buildings. So that's like a plan to create a plan to decarbonize existing buildings. And what San Jose is doing is they're all in for outreach. So like, we're going to do outreach with community members, with environmental advocates, with appliance installers and manufacturers and developers, and we're going to figure out what everyone's issues are. And we're going to use this stakeholder feedback to write an ordinance that hopefully doesn't make enough people angry to where it won't pass. And that's their strategy. And they're currently in the outreach phase of that. The next city I highlighted was Palo Alto. I forget the meeting date for this one, but it was just a couple weeks ago that they adopted updates to their sustainability and climate action plan, including separately a pilot program for the electrification of existing buildings. So this is a targeted program in the city where they're going to be using city funds to replace gas water heaters for the homes of 1,000 people. So small targeted program. And this is going to be a pilot test for, is the city capable of implementing a program that can equitably replace appliance infrastructure for folks? So I just keep my eyes on those 2 cities to begin with. If you like those 2 and you want to check out a third one, the city of Menlo Park also has a similar pilot program for buildings.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to say existing buildings is tough. It's extremely tough. No city has passed an ordinance requiring the electrification of existing buildings yet. And I think for a city to do that, to be able to be in a place where they can pass an ordinance, they have to really figure out all the stakeholder outreach. They have to get the rebates in place to make sure that it's equitable for folks. They got to have equity protections in their ordinance to make sure that, if you're requiring someone to do something in their own home, you got to make sure that it's not hurting low income people. So, really making sure that the rebates are lined up. And if for whatever reason it's not cost effective, having a way out. So I'm going to link you to something really quick here. And sorry for going so far into this. You asked me a question about something I'm really passionate about. I'm going to link you to something called Bay Area Reach Codes. This is a website created by a partnership of a bunch of different agencies. And they have produced model reach codes. So model reach codes for new construction and model reach codes for existing buildings. So for existing buildings, they have a really nice equity clause in there, which says if the total cost of whatever we're requiring to do is 110% of the cost of what you would normally do with gas, you're exempt. You can apply to the city for an exemption. So that language is simple, and I think it covers a lot of folks. And these model codes are great. So I've put the link in the chat here if you want to read through that as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh wow, yeah, thank you so much for going in depth. That was so cool. I'll definitely have to take a look at the resources that you recommended. Oh, Bonnie, do you have a question?
Yeah, so Dash, thank you so much for such a practical and doable way to really affect change locally in our communities. And I just wanted to kind of follow up on what Alan said about, can you speak if you're not a member of the city but what we did when we were trying to get Marin Clean Energy Fairfield to adopt it. We went, I spoke, it was in person, I spoke, and we just brought an entourage of people that weren't necessarily residents of the city, but the city doesn't know. And then and I just, had them all stand up, and they all stood up in support. And so it looks like you're there in numbers, and you can even, wear the same color t-shirt or something like that as well, like a green t-shirt. We actually went out and bought all green t-shirts so that we could show up, and actually the city did end up adopting it. So we felt very, just to be able to help push them in the right direction. But I just wanted to share that too. Thank you very much again.
Awesome. Congratulations on that. And thanks so much.
Oh, Alice, do you have a question?
Yes, thanks. I was going to ask, I love that you got into the detail of the nitty gritty and gave us like literally the roadmap of how to deal with this with city council. So thanks for that, Dash. My question is, who do you talk to? And it could be any, municipality in general. Who do you talk to and how do you get on the agenda? Let's say you have a proposal for an issue that the city really hasn't really, touched yet. And you've organized, or you have your student club is all focused on this, right? And you want to start a campaign for this. Who do you talk to and how do you get onto the agenda?
That is a great question, Alice. And you actually reminded me of something that I forgot to mention in my PowerPoint, which is finding a champion on the elected official body that you're influencing. So that's like step one is you got to get one of the elected officials to open a dialogue with you and support what you want to do, because you're going to need someone to vouch for you and to propose your item onto the agenda. Now, how do you do that? So you're going to kind of want to be thinking about a few parallel tracks simultaneously. So this is what I would recommend. Step one is you reach out to city council members and look for a champion. You have an idea about the policy you want to push. You know that the city hasn't done it yet. You can talk to the elected officials and gauge their interest. And from there, you figure out, hey, we talked to the council members. 3 out of 5 seemed really interested. And Joe over here seemed like he'd be our council champion. So, hey, that's great. So that's step one. You've talked to council. Step two is, meanwhile, you and maybe 3 or 4 of your friends, or maybe just you alone, are showing up at every city council meeting, and you're speaking during that oral communications part of the agenda. And you're telling them, hey, you still haven't adopted a climate action plan yet, or whatever it is. Please do that. And here's why it's important. So, you and your crew are showing up, egging the council on publicly, where anyone can see that you're egging them on. You're talking to them privately, giving them information. And this is kind of if you really want to be spicy with it, I recommend also talking to staff and getting their view on things and sharing staff resources like, hey, I've got this model code here. What do you think of this? Or a great question I have for staff is, let's say council were to direct you to create an ordinance. Do you feel like you have enough time and resources in your work plan to be able to create something like this? What resources do you need? Because a lot of times, like in Santa Clara County, my whole philosophy in that county is to try to get the Board of Supervisors to just give their sustainability staff more funding so that they can actually do things, because they're so underfunded. So figuring out what the needs of staff are is important. So again, putting this all together, you've talked to the council members behind the scenes, you're pressuring them publicly in verbal communications, and you've checked with staff to make sure that if they do get asked to do something, that they'd be cool with it. And the way this plays out is your council champion says, yeah, I'd like to propose adding this item onto a future agenda for discussion. And then council says, oh, okay, well, let's check in with staff. Hey, if we asked you to do this, what would you say? And staff, since you've already checked in with them, is like, yeah, we think we'd be able to create this ordinance, and then the city can proceed with that. I-
Thanks, Dash. Yeah. Oh,
Sure.
that's okay. I got the 3 steps. Great, great pathway. And then do cities ever, and I've never actually asked for this or done this, but I wonder, I'm curious, have you ever been, like when you get on the agenda, has the city ever given like a group, say, a Climate Reality Bear or, some other organization, given them the floor on the agenda? Like, here's a 10-minute presentation on climate action plans, like say the city does one, and they give the group or the person, the entity that asked for that agenda piece, the floor for 10 minutes. Has that ever happened?
It's happened, but not as part of like let's say you're pushing for an ordinance. That ordinance agenda item is going to be all staff, all council. And aside from the public comment, you won't be called to the podium. However, let's say you have a youth climate action team that they've got a whole PowerPoint on climate action plans. They want to share it with the city. You can ask the city to do like a presentation item or a ceremonial item. And, the city at that point can give you like a 10-minute presentation agenda item, and it's just you, it's just your presentation to council. I have seen some youth climate action teams do that before, like in the city of Cupertino and the city of Morgan Hill are 2 off at the top of my head, where some of our local teams said, hey, we've got a PowerPoint, will you give us 10 minutes to present? Usually want to ask the mayor that, since they typically have the most control over the agenda.
Cool.
But
Very,
yeah,
very cool.
it'll be separate from the ordinance that you're pushing for, though.
Gotcha. Josh, are there any more questions in the chat or Crystal, hands up?
I don't see any hands up, but if anyone wants to like put their questions in the chat, if they don't want to raise their hand, feel free to do that.
Yeah.
And Josh can like read out loud the question.
Yeah, I think while we're waiting for a couple more questions, I'm going to make some closing announcements, and then Crystal's going to take us out with some inspiration to close out the evening. But I wanted to announce that the YCAT are looking for at least 1 more adult mentor co-chair, as well as maybe 2 more youth co-chairs to move us into the next time span 2023 and 2025. And we want to thank Crystal for her service in serving with our as our co-chair for the last couple of years. She will be moving on into her more senior years in her collegiate studies. So we want to thank Crystal right now, and thank you for your leadership. And also thank Josh for also stepping up to the plate to continue on as another co-chair through his senior year, and hopefully, if we're lucky, through his freshman years. And I'm going to put that into the chat, and maybe also Crystal, you've got another, let's see, we've got an application and another link that we can. So if you know of a youth member or are an adult member who are interested in stepping up to co-chair, we encourage you to just fill out the quick little Google form. And the next announcement is also that our next event that we will be planning, YCAT will be planning to sponsor as a whole chapter event like this, will be early in the next quarter of the next year. And the focus will be on climate change science curriculum as taught in K-12, and also broaching the topic of environmental justice curriculum in K-12. And so we want to also see if anybody's interested in working on that program and putting together some of that event planning. Also, please do put your name in the chat and let us know how we can connect with you. So I am going to now turn that over to Crystal to close us out with some inspiration.
I see one other hand.
Oh yeah,
up.
there's one.
Oh, there's one more hand.
Yeah, there's one more hand. Wei Tai, do you want to go
Oh,
for
hi,
it?
everybody. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in and say thank you to Dash for a great presentation. I'm a city council member in the city of Lafayette. And so I just wanted to say here on the whole presentation, it was chock full of great education as well as strategies and tips. Too much to articulate, but let me just point out 2 things. Number one, when you talk about youth voices having a lot of power, I'll just draw up at yesterday's city council meeting for Lafayette. We had 3 8th graders who 3 years ago, when they were in 5th grade, they wanted to stop idling of cars who are parents waiting to pick up their kids, and they wanted to pass this no idling ordinance. And so they've been at it for 3 years at the school board level, the planning and so forth, and coming back and forth. And, finally, last night, we actually did pass a resolution for no idling that got our police chief and, our city manager and so forth. And it was passed, 5-0 by the city council. So they're now in 8th grade. And for them, that's like a long time to go from 5th grade to 8th grade. And it was so cute in a way that the student said, yeah, that took a long time. But boy, were they persistent, and they won people over by their persistence, right? And they got coverage in the papers today. It's in the papers. And so I really tip my hat to them, and I'm so proud of their what they did. And as what you said, Dash, this is like they have a superpower, right? Youth have a superpower, and to see a 5th graders go at it just warms my heart, and I think validates what you're saying. So anyways, yeah, I thought that was excellent point. And just in general, I do think that the public has way more influence than they think they have by speaking up. City council members do want to hear from constituents. We don't want to hear from the same old people who are always at the same old meetings saying the same old things. We like to hear new voices. And so if you're nervous or haven't done it before, actually, we're quite interested in hearing different voices show up. So I would just encourage people to, like Brett said, he spoke up for the first time, and I'm glad Brett said, you had a good experience, because it wasn't until I was over 50 years old that maybe I spoke up for the first time. So you can be youth or you can be older, but go out and speak, and it all feels good, and it is effective.
And I just want to echo too that just say that the event on November 17th, YCAT has been instrumental in putting that event together of local city council members and staff. So please put that on your calendars. The event will be up soon on the website.
Yeah, it plays to Dash's slide where he said there are 3 pressure points, right? Elected officials, commissions, and staff, right? So I've learned that as I've become a council member, that those are pressure points, and that we're actually going to have staffers and council members and commissioners on that panel to talk about strategies of how you go after each of those pressure points. So synergistic what you talked about, Dash, today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And those sounds like a really exciting panel. I might hop in on that and see if
November
I can
17th.
glean any info. November 17th. Awesome.
Yeah, we haven't put it on the website yet, but 6:00 on the 17th.
Right on. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Dash. Yes. I think maybe Crystal, you want to take us away?
Do you want me to?
Yeah. Wait, should I play the video or? Oh wait, okay. I just want to thank you so much, Josh, for taking the time to do this. It was it was incredible, super inspirational. And I love how you gave such clear and concise steps of how to really approach this mystical idea of local government. Super powerful. Thank you so much. And also we'll as if people want to stay a little bit over, we have a special video prepared. I think Sue.
I can play it. I'm ready to go.
Oh, okay. It's just a really powerful video about youth advocacy.
Some of you may know the speaker. It's Jamie Margolin, who started 0 Hour after she did her own climate reality training, and she's been also promoted with climate reality as a great youth leader. So, Bonnie, take it away.
I want the entirety of Congress, in fact, the whole U.S. government, to remember the fear and despair that my generation lives with every day, and I want you to hold on to it.
My name is Jamie Margolin, and I'm an 18-year-old climate justice organizer, activist, and author. Living in the Pacific Northwest, I live in Seattle, Washington. There's so much natural beauty. Washington is known as the evergreen state because the trees are green all year round. And even though I live in a very urban area, it's still green everywhere. There's trees everywhere. But that means you can see what once was and the skeleton of once was, and you can also see the destruction. that all just like made me really, really passionate. Like, okay, I really, really want to stand up against the climate crisis, but I didn't know how to get started. What changed for me at 14 was the 2016 election. 2016 election did not go the way that I wanted, and I was absolutely devastated. And I wanted to get involved in a local climate justice organization because that was the issue that, like, from the day one was really, really at the top of my mind, and was, as a young person, I worried about extensively. I Googled a local organization, found a website, called the number, said, I have no clue what I'm doing. I've never done anything like this before. I want to help. It just kind of snowballed from there. You know, this was the summer of 2017, so there was Hurricane Maria, Hurricane Harvey, the wildfires. Trump announced that the United States was going to pull out of the Paris Climate Accords. And so it was just bad thing after bad thing after bad thing after bad thing. And eventually I was like, you know what, screw it. We need to do something big. And so I posted on social media that I wanted to organize a youth climate march. And I asked, okay, who's with me? I had a very low amount of social media followers and engagement. So it wasn't like I posted and then it just happened. I got a response from a girl who lived in Baltimore, who I had been internet friends with, named Nadia Nazar. We got on the phone. Then I pulled in a few other people. I sent a bunch of emails. I found some mentors to help me. It was a very slow build. It wasn't like a viral moment. We didn't hire anyone. We didn't have the money to hire anyone to organize anything for us. We organized it ourselves. And by we, I mean the young people that ended up becoming 0 Hour. Vision of what we were trying to organize was big youth mass mobilization all over the world for climate justice. Big movements in the past have had some sort of mass mobilization, so it was also learning from past movements. We didn't ask for this crisis, but we are the ones inheriting the worst of it. There were a lot of people who didn't believe in us. There was a lot of lack of resources and funding. What if it never catches on? What if there's no momentum? What if we can't pull this off? I ended up not giving up because it was just like, you know, that Dory mindset, like just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep trying, and then, you know, something happens. A year later, from that initial post, we had the Youth Climate March on Washington, D.C., July of 2018, and in 25 cities around the world.
Next up, we have 0 Hour, one of the founding members, Jamie Margolin, who's going to come speak. Everyone who is here is here because they believe in this issue.
It was pouring rain. Of all days, you know, of course it has to rain. A lot of people showed up actually, and we ended up having a great march in the pouring rain.
I feel this energy and it's incredible. So keep it up.
Days before the march, we had a big lobby day where we all went to Capitol Hill and lobbied different senators. We met with Senator Bernie Sanders, Senator Tammy Duckworth, and we were delivering our demands to different senators on Capitol Hill, like, hey, we're going to be marching in a few days. This is what we're asking for. Stay tuned. You know, this issue is something that I don't have time to wait until I'm older to take action on. And so being young, you know, there's urgency in the work that I do because it's an issue of life or death for my generation.
Climate change has got to go, hey, hey! Ho, ho! Climate change has got to go, hey, hey!
Movements need everyone. They need people to organize, but they also need people to create art to inspire and communicate messages. They need writers. They need people to help manage the technology. Channel whatever passion or talent that you have into a cause that you care about or an organization that you want to support. You know, we're taught that you have to have a college degree to literally do anything in life, and that's just not true. Whatever stage in life that you're at, have special wisdom that comes with that stage of life, and you can make real change.
By 2030, I will be old enough to run for Congress and be seated right where you guys are sitting right now. By then, we need to have already achieved net zero greenhouse gas emissions and be rapidly on the path to climate recovery.
Wow, wasn't that incredible? I mean, I get so inspired. I've watched it like 5
Great.
times. And I always get so inspired. So I
I
want to
love
thank you.
that just keep swimming
Yeah.
mentality. Just keep going.
Yeah. I guess, are there any last little comments, questions? Somebody want to say what they're feeling, what they thought after seeing that?
I'm so happy to see that. That was wonderful.
Yeah, I think, okay, maybe what we'll do in the next newsletter, maybe share out that link. And I know this is being recorded. So if you know someone who missed this whole event, it'll be up on the chapter YouTube, I think, in a few days. Is that right, Bunny or Sue?
I think probably it takes a week or
at least a
so.
week or so.
Yeah, it takes a week or so.
Yeah.
I hope she does
We'll
run.
get
for
it. We'll get it
Congress.
up as soon as we can.
Also, I actually want to share another, we won't play it, but there's a group of 9, there were 3 9-year-old girls who really made an impact on their town council. And they're a group called Save Tomorrow. And I'll put the link to that video in the chat, but they went and, convinced their town council. These 3 9-year-old girls went and convinced their town council to put solar panels everywhere and on the schools, and they saved a little forest. I mean, they really did amazing, and very inspirational as well. Well, I really appreciate everyone coming and sticking out. If there's any last words, but I want to thank the YCAT team as well.
It's
And
great to be here. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you so much to the YCAT and Climate Reality Project for hosting. Thanks so much for everyone who came. Hope you spread the word about advocacy and share those UNO currents around with everyone.
Yes. Round of applause for our wonderful speaker, Dash. Yay.
Thank you.
And also here is actually, unless you already put it, let me just put
I put
it for the clip that we showed. And
yes.
but we'll keep the room open for a few more minutes. But if folks need to go, please feel free. I know some people haven't maybe eaten dinner yet, so please, but I can keep. And Sue, if you need to drop off, that's fine. I can keep the room open, but we'll just hang out for a minute or so. If folks have any last, Dash, again, thank you so much. It's always just a pleasure to hear your presentation. Even though I've heard it before, I could hear it again and again. And then I'm like, okay, wait a minute, I have to go do that right now,
Yeah, sometimes I fall short to my own framework and I have to go back. I'm like, wait, I didn't do that step. I should reach out to staff.
And we'd love to have, you came to our squad meeting and you did a wonderful job. It was so good. And I just would love to let the squad leaders know that, I think you are usually very accommodating to attend squad meetings if folks would want that too, the county squads.
Absolutely. Yeah, always happy to join more meetings and share the word and maybe spark a couple catalytic reactions in the brains of a few more advocates out there, potential advocates.
And get down and dirty about reach codes for sure.
Oh yeah, let's go through the code language. Let's do it. No, just kidding.
Which is super great. Hi, oh, we see a hand, Carolina.
Hi everyone, thank you for giving me the time to talk. So let me lower my hand. So I'm a mentor in a group from environmental studies at the San Jose State University. And I am part of the climate reality group on employee engagement. So I am a technical mentor, and we are launching a survey on objects durability. So we are working, so I'm an industrial designer, and I work in the area of circular economy. Mm-hmm. So I would like to share the survey with you, and we are building the largest database for objects durability in the US. And we are looking for people to contribute from young to older, to also add your contribution. So we want to get as many people as possible. So I will put here the link. If you can participate, it only takes 5 minutes.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll take a look at that.
Thank you so much. Well, I actually want to close us out and also excuse our co-chairs because they might have homework tonight. So thanks so much for hosting and moderating, Crystal and Josh. And I myself am going to sign off. And I want to thank everybody for coming, and especially to our presenter, Dash. Take care, everyone. Good night.